Today on Co-op for Two, a quick spoiler-free review of the 50 Clues series. It's definitely not for everyone, but is it for you? Let's find out. So what is 50 Clues? I would call this a small card-based narrative puzzle adventure game. There are currently 3 sets of 3 boxes each. This is the first set here. They cost about $15 per box. Sometimes they go on sale or you could find them used. It'll take you about 90 minutes to play through each box. It is a continuing story. I would say the difficulty of the puzzles are medium. It does require an internet connection. You will be using a mobile app, a tablet or a phone throughout. And there's no replayability here. You'll play through it once, but nothing gets destroyed, so you could pass it along when you finish. Mechanically, we've seen this kind of narrative puzzle game before, but this really is a unique set for one reason. It is the dark horror theme. It is very heavy in terms of dark story. There is some real horror elements here. It is rated at 18 plus, and there's some disturbing subject matter covered here. The art is very evocative of this feel. It's sort of like a black and white graphic novel. Now, you can visit 50clues.com. In addition to watching a nice tutorial, you can download 2 mini sample games, about 18 cards each, and print and play them yourself if you want to get a feel for what how creepy, how dark the level of the game is, and if it's for you. Now, I have played through the first set of 3 boxes on YouTube Live. It takes us about 5 hours to play through each box. It won't take you that long, but I haven't played the other 2 sets. In this first set, it's especially dark because the protagonist, the character that you play, is a schizophrenic and does does sort of evil things to people, and you sort of have to put yourself in that role. And some people have found that unpleasant, but some people may appreciate the novelty of it. It's not clear if the future boxes carry this idea. They're all very dark and rated at 18 plus, but you may not play the schizophrenic protagonist in all of the series. You do throughout the first set, though. Now, unlike many of these mystery card-based games, in this one, you don't answer questions at the end. You just play through a series of mostly linear puzzles with some choose-your-adventure elements, and then you get to the end. It's a rather abrupt end, in fact, in each box, and I'll return to that in a bit. Okay, now I've said this will be a spoiler-free review, but I do need to show you the art in this game, because I think that's a big part of the enjoyment factor of this game, whether you're going to like it or not. So I'm going to show you the first couple cards in the game, just the cards you would get on your first turn, so you can get a feel for what it's like. So you've got some instructions, and you can watch a tutorial online. And I'll explain the mechanics of the game, which are basically summarized in this card. It's very easy to follow. There's a little opening story about a dead child in a suitcase. Again, this is stuff you see in the prologue tutorial. And this is what cards will look like, and this is fairly representative of the art style here. There's sort of hand-drawn black and white sketches, occasionally with a little bit of red color in here. And these 2 cards give you a good idea of what you're up against. Heavy in the art, a little bit of text on cards. You can see one of the mechanics is these red 3-digit numbers. These are things you can interact with, so you combine them. So you could combine the pliers and this bed over here. Occasionally there are small little details to try to notice that are important for solving mysteries. You'll see, this is our little summary of sort of the different symbols. At the top, it'll tell you when to get rid of cards, so it'll be sort of cleaning up the table from cards as you go, but you'll frequently have 5, 6, 7 cards on the table. Some of them won't be used until later, so you're not sure exactly what cards are needed for what puzzles. The red, as I said, are for combining and interacting cards. Occasionally you see these dark black numbers. Those will be either places you can explore, or more frequently you'll get a card with 4 or 5 of these numbers, and you're supposed to figure out which is the correct answer to a puzzle. And I'll show you the user interface in a second. And then you've got these hidden numbers, light numbers, which just tell you to go grab those cards. So that's how these cards came out. They told you to go, when you see a number, you just bring that card out. All right, now let's take a look at the user interface, because you'll be interacting with this very frequently. And you can see you've got a space near the top to combine red numbers, and then you've got a place where you can fill in a code, and sometimes the code will just be 3-digit numbers that you see on a card, but sometimes the code will be an answer to a puzzle. They'll always be digits, but sometimes they can be very long, and you won't be given a clue about how long the answer to a puzzle is, so sometimes that's part of the challenge. And then you can see below that there's a hint button. You just click that, and the game knows where you are based on what puzzles you've solved. You click hint, and it gives you the first hint, which might be very vague, and then you can click it again, it'll give you the next little more detailed hint, and again. Now, I am not a person who likes using apps when I play these type of games, but this is about as painless as it gets. It's actually a very pleasant interface. It's very hard to make mistakes. You don't have to jump around between pages. It's always up there. It's about as pleasant as I've used, and it actually works very well. And it's a little bit unusual in that you could just click hint and it knows right where you are and gives you a hint. So very well done, very simple. And you can see at the top, occasionally, most of the time nothing is timed, but occasionally you'll get to a point for increased tension. It'll be like, you have to hurry up and solve this quickly. And I don't think it times out, but your score will be affected by how quickly you finish a specific puzzle. Let's talk about the pros here from my perspective. This is a unique game. There are no other puzzle games I know that are anywhere near as dark and seriously adult horror as this. In the first set that I've played here, you play a disturbed schizophrenic criminal who harms children, and there really is harm to children here. And that's going to turn off many people, maybe most players. But for those of you looking for something different who can appreciate this sort of dark stuff, you may find something quite special and novel here. The art, I love it. Not everyone is going to love this. It's very different from what we're used to in these games, which tend to be very colorful and family friendly. This one is very evocative. You can see there's not much text, so although there are some real adult themes of violence here that you'll have to commit while playing this game, you're not reading about all the details of it. It's usually just very quick action, but it's disturbing concepts. I love the art style. Now, puzzles, that's probably what you care about most if you're playing this kind of game. I would say there are some quite good puzzles here. There's a nice variety. Often you have to sit, you can watch our playthroughs of this. We sit and chew on it for quite a while. There's a good mix and variety here. Some are fairly straightforward, and some are actually quite clever. I would say medium difficulty for the most part here. Nothing really stumped us for hours, but the hint system is very good, so if you do get stuck. it does use one of the things we've seen in the better of these puzzle games, which is it's a linear, it's a fairly linear solving of puzzles. It's a very linear story. There's no branching off. But occasionally you will get cards that you can't use yet, especially these cards where you've got things to interact. And so you've got a set of cards on the table and you're frequently asking, what are we supposed to do next? What puzzle can we solve next? And most of the time that's a good feeling, not knowing exactly what to work on next. But one of the ways that it keeps you from being totally overwhelmed is as cards come out, it'll tell you, you're done with these cards. So you're constantly getting new cards out and they stay on the table for a while. Frequently they stay on the table past when they're actually needed because the game wants to have you faced with some amount of uncertainty about what cards are available. But then as you play, cards will leave the table. So you've got a reasonable amount in front of you. So in addition to solving puzzles, which is fairly standard type of puzzle solving, you've also got this sort of periodic choose your own, well, it's not choose your own adventure because you're not really branching, but it's more like a point and click adventure where you're saying use this object on this and then it advances the story. Something happens and it advances. And it does make for nice pacing. It's sort of like spend 15 minutes working on a puzzle and then you get a nice break where you're like, okay, use this with this thing or interact with this person, and then the story advances and proceeds to a new scene. And you're sort of moving. You're moving in this game between different scenes, so you're always on the move. The pace is nice. The use of the clock occasionally to create some tensions is nice. And one of the things I also appreciated was the app and scoring system. We've seen a bunch of these puzzle games where your score is just based on how fast you can solve the game, and I don't like that. I don't want it to be rushed around. In this game, apart from the very occasional timed elements, which are always narratively based, it's always, you only get timed when you're in a situation where you're in danger. But you can see on the app screen that every time you answer a puzzle, it gives you 1 to 5 stars, and it shows you how many stars you got for that puzzle. And those stars are purely based on how many hints you took and how many mistaken guesses you made. And it's a nice system because frequently you'll get a card, you don't see it on any of these, but you'll get a card with like 5 potential answers, codes that are potential answers. And one of the complaints on the internet I've seen for reviews of this is they said, well, it felt like we were just guessing at which one it was. You could just guess. Sometimes there's only 3 possibilities. You could put in those 3 if you're not sure, and you got a 30% chance of being right. But you're getting penalized if you guess wrong. So it does make you stop and think, is this the right answer? I don't want to guess wrong and get a bad score. It's actually one of the better scoring systems I've seen. Doesn't get in the way, but it does motivate you to be sure of your answer before you go. All right, let's talk about some of the negatives for this game. First of all, as I've mentioned, there's no real branching paths here. I mean, very occasional in the most minimal way, but for the most part, it's just a linear story. And you can't choose different ways to do things. And I would say the puzzles here are real, they're interesting, but the point and click object combinations here are almost always just very obvious and very straightforward. Not always, but for the most part, and that's a bit of a missed opportunity here. We've seen in the better games that use this mechanic of interacting objects that that element can be a real puzzle, and that's what we sort of want in a classic adventure game, where sometimes the whole puzzles are trying to figure out how can we combine objects to get some interesting result, to solve the puzzle. Here, that doesn't really happen. You're basically just, it's either obvious or there's no options, and so you're basically only got these two things, so you just combine them just to advance the story. A major weakness, from my perspective, in this series, for a game where story plays such a prominent role, is that each of the boxes just ends very abruptly. It feels like the final puzzle is just one other puzzle, and then basically you turn over a card and it says, the game's over. Or you get one little picture and then it's over. And in fact, it was a little bit of a surprise because these three boxes in each series are a continuing story. I thought, okay, when we get to the end of the final box, we'll have a real finale, showdown, and an epilogue, several cards. And it's really sort of shocking how abrupt and anticlimactic the ending of these stories are. It's not common. It's actually most puzzle card-based games we see, most of these kinds of games make some effort to give you a little epilogue story, and it's just missing here, and it feels missing. It feels like you want something more, especially since you don't answer any questions or anything. You just turn over the card and all of a sudden it's over and the game gives you a little percentage score. Now, I've talked about the user interface on the tablet or phone app. I actually like it quite a bit. Occasionally, you can break it in a very minor way. We never got into too much trouble, but the way it works is it knows where you are in the story based on what you've solved. And that's an advantage because in some of these similar games we play, every puzzle you solve or want to hint on, you have to sort of tell it what puzzle you're working on. And you don't have to do that here, which makes it enjoyable. But a couple times in the series of games we played, we had solved a puzzle that the game didn't think we should be able to solve yet, and it sort of confused it. It said, like, get this card or you should have this card, and we didn't have that card because we had bypassed its expected order. So nothing that was a showstopper, and only happened maybe 2 or 3 times in the course of the set of 3 boxes, but it was a weird thing. And then occasionally, like most of these games, we got a little bit of a clunker of a puzzle, either one that was unpleasant because it didn't feel fair, one based on locale. These are not native English cases. They're translated very well, but occasionally that can lead to a little bit of an issue, recognizing some cultural thing or some geographic thing. And then occasionally there are some puzzles here that are a little bit disappointing, like running a maze. And you're like, really? Did this need to be here? It doesn't seem like much of an interesting challenge. Most of the puzzles, though, I did like. Okay, let me give you my final thoughts here. This is a unique experience with a real dark vision, and the vision of one person, you can feel it. It is, to me, like reading a dark graphic novel, which I tend to like. I guess I would rate this at maybe a 7.58 out of 10. And I would, I would move that down if you don't care about the theme and the art. I think maybe there are better places to, if the matter is going to disturb you, then this is not the game for you. But if this appeals to you, then it really is something different, and I would rank it, maybe move it higher, and really recommend you try to chase this down and find it if you're interested in something, a novel sort of shock experience. The only place where I would temper that, though, is the price of this game. If these are selling for $20 a box, that feels a little high to me. And I think you should look to buy these used or on sale. If you can get a box for $10, I think it's worth giving it a try. It is a continuing story, so if you like it, you can't just pick one of these in the middle. I do think picking the first set, which is called Leopold, boxes 1, 2, and 3, if you can get your hands on that entire set as a used set for $20 or $30, then I definitely think you should give it a try. The first set does put you in the role of this schizophrenic person, and some people are disturbed by the idea that they have to act out these dark, harmful things. And if you're triggered by children getting hurt, this is not the game for you. But I think you could just reframe the game as trying to reconstruct what this mad person did, and maybe that means you can escape having to feel like you've got agency over doing these things. Another little thing is I do think that you can see it's called 50 clues because each box has about 50 cards, but really these should have been sold as a set. You can't play them out of order, and the story doesn't finish. It doesn't make sense to play just one. So I do think get a whole set of 3, get it used, and get it on sale, and then you'll see what this is really about. You could download and print and play the little mini games if you want to get some feel for what the experience is like. And if you're interested in similar games without this dark theme, you might check out Decketective or Unlock, similar types of games, but without this theme and with more colorful art. Okay, I hope that's useful for you. If you have a different experience with 50 Clues, I'd like to hear it. We'll probably be playing through the rest of these sets on the channel if you're interested in joining us live, and I'll see you next time.